All right, Hangout is live. Brief echo of myself. Yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
And tonight we are talking about Survivor Ghost Island Episode 5. Not the most exciting episode there's ever been. It's a little predictable, I think, ultimately. But, well, I don't know. Maybe I feel like my general impression has shifted around a lot over the course of the, almost a week since I saw it.
Really? I still feel strongly that I don't know what would have made this episode better. I mean, it was fine, but it was very simple.
Yeah, yeah.
It felt like all of the time was spent just giving us a reason to care about the person who was ultimately going home, while also giving us a little bit of character development into some other characters that are still going to be here, but maybe on the block at some other point, so they've already kind of pre-set us up to care about them. Which again, it's a part of the season.
Yeah.
But as far as, did this advance the game strategically, dramatically? Not really.
Yeah, I think that's maybe where I can, tripped myself up a little bit there, was just in the sense that it was very by the numbers. And so maybe simple is better than predictable, because I wasn't, it's not like I guessed that it would be Stephanie specifically, as much as it was simple in the sense that no real interesting play changed things up. So it really just became a numbers game, and, who it was down to, like, well, the people in charge get to pick between these two people, and they did, and that's what happened.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it was very simple. It's like, hey, we got to pick one of this group, and what was it? Jenna kind of worked Sebastian to help, and then Michael worked on Bradley, and that was about it. And then when they found out that Stephanie had no advantage, they were just kind of like, that's pretty easy. Let's just do that.
Yeah. I think it's not like in some of the past episodes where, like, even when it ended up going the numbers way, there was some interesting thing mixing it up that seemed like it might have a chance, even if it didn't ultimately work. But this time it just felt like there really wasn't even anything like that. It was kind of just, they were doomed.
Right. And all of the drama was basically of the debate, who do they go for? Because Jenna's an easy vote. Michael's a big threat. Stephanie's a little bit of both and has the social game. What will they do? And then it's like, let's just make it super, super emotional about why Stephanie's here. And then you're like, you kind of, I don't know if you tipped your hand, but the thumb was definitely on the scale of who we were leaning towards realizing was going to go out, because we would feel the most bad for them.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and rewind back to the beginning of the episode.
Yep.
We started off with Bradley talking about how, even though things had ultimately gone his way and his alliance's way, it was closer than he had expected it to be. And the fact that the other group had targeted him was a little bit alarming, meaning it really just came down to a guessing game of who to play the idol for versus who Bradley's group was voting for. And it worked out, but it was only by chance that it worked out, really. And he would have been the one to go otherwise. And so that's alarming. But that said, I couldn't help but think, a wake-up call to what exactly? I mean, what is it that you're going to do differently now? Because it seems like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't win. Well, I guess they won the reward.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to remember because was it last time that
Oh, no.
because
They didn't win
the one tribe has just been dominating. They've won like 4 challenges in a row now with these two.
Yeah, my notes I refer to, like, there's Navidi, and then the group they call like the Navidi 5.
Yeah, they've been bad this year or this season about they mixed it up, and there's a new Navidi and new Malolo, but they keep referring to everybody as the Navidi 4 or whatever, and it just confuses everything.
Right. So I wrote that Navidi won the reward, and then but we'd been talking about the Navidi 5, so I was like, oh wait, they won reward, but no, they didn't, because it was Chris.
Well, okay, so yeah,
took over the reward. So yeah, you're right. That tribe has been dominating. So nothing, even just from a gameplay, like nothing changed really.
Yeah. So Navidi is the tribe that won, but when they won the reward challenge, they talked about how that was their 3rd in a row.
Yes. And then ultimately they won then a 4th in a row.
Mm-hmm.
As you pointed out, that's also, I think, probably one of the other things that made this particular episode less interesting is that not only, so nothing has changed. Like, so they, Bradley makes this big stand about, oh, I got to mix this up or do that. They go and they lose the reward, then they lose the immunity, and now they just have greater numbers because now they're 5-3.
Yeah.
And they ultimately just pick somebody and vote them out. Like, nothing changed. Bradley didn't do anything different except not be mad at Michael for trying to pick him.
Yeah.
That was like his largest strategic gameplay of this was, okay, Michael was a threat because he was after me, but now that he came and talked to me, I guess he's not, and I'll do Stephanie.
Yeah, Bradley has a little bit of unearned leadership credibility right now, I think, because he hasn't really had to do very much. Now, maybe we can give him at least some credit in, like, last time, that whole plan was dependent on having none of the 5 flip, right? Under risk of, oh, if they guess right and play the idol for who we're voting for, then one of us goes, unless one of the 5 flips, right? And so having them stay together in the face of that threat, I mean, there's something to that. Now, how much of that credit we want to give to Bradley is not clear, but I mean, they did stay strong in the face of a temptation to flip last time. Yeah. But in any event, Bradley talks about a wake-up call, even if we haven't really seen him change anything yet. He didn't have to this time. But in the meantime, Michael's remaining allies kind of commiserate, and they thank him at least as like, you could have just played it for yourself and played it safe, but you did the best you could trying to guess who it was going to be, and you were willing to play it for someone other than yourself. And they thanked him for that, even though obviously it didn't work out the way they hoped. So that brings us to the reward challenge, though. It was pretty early in the episode. I liked the reward challenge was for coffee and pastries. I liked the pile of heavy sandbags around the lever. I just feel like I don't remember seeing that before. Maybe they've done it before, but I didn't. Not in a long time, or I didn't remember it. But I just kind of liked it. It just seemed like, in some ways, it seems sort of really straightforward, except that it actually is one of those things where it's like, if they're actually really pretty heavy, and how many of them do you have to move? How do you choose which ones to move and when to try to pull the lever versus try to move more sandbags? I mean, it's a surprisingly complex little activity.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't remember having seen this one before either, and it was interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I liked that piece, and then of course that just lets them unlock the sandbag tosses. But then we had Chris just totally dominate the bag throwing part and win for Navidi. Like, so the Navidi tribe is clearly strong, but he also is obviously a real physical asset for them.
Yes.
Talks about being a college pitcher. We can see how that would come in handy. So once again, we have them have to go to Rocks to pick someone to go to Ghost Island. It ended up being Stephanie, just by sheer sort of dumb luck, because it's Rocks. And see, we talked about this last time, but just the whole, they've built a mechanic that practically guarantees that it'll always be Rocks, which is kind of, can't imagine that's what they intended.
Yeah, and so I'm pretty positive, based on my notes and recollection, that they don't get into much about what's happening next week in the previews in the episode. Is that correct?
I think next time they imply that there's going to be another tribe mix-up.
Yeah, so something else happens at Ghost Island too. I only know that because this is now March Madness, so there's a lot of games on CBS, and they put a ton of advertising against Survivor and their other shows during the basketball games. And there was something about, like, whether it was like a new spin on Ghost Island or, something changes there. They wouldn't really get into it because obviously they're advertising to people who don't necessarily haven't been watching.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talking about what it is. So something else happens there in addition to the mix-up.
I am 100%. Sorry.
I was going to say, it's probably because this has been not cool,
Well, yeah, I guess that's what I was going to jump in to say, which was just that I'm on board for them mixing that up a little bit, because so far it's been long on promise, short on delivery in terms of Ghost Island. And it's, again, we talked about this too, but it strikes me as a huge mistake to ever have any of the players there break the urn and get, sorry, you don't get to play. Like, what? That's just dumb. Why would they do that? I don't understand that decision.
Yeah. I mean, I was defending it for a while, but it has definitely tipped to where this is just dumb. Mm-hmm. And there should be something else that can happen. If you don't, like, I understand, like, and I think you made this great point, and I defended the show, but your point was, they already have to compete if they get it, and we understand they want it to be so, like, these things to be so powerful that they're rare and hard to get, but there's got to be somewhere in between where, maybe I just seem like it's skewed to where you don't even do anything interesting.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, maybe you have to play a much harder game, or, you have less odds or something. Like, just let them do some sort of activity.
Yeah.
Even if they ultimately don't get it. Like, the fact that it's just like,
yeah, like, or just have smaller prizes. Like, if you don't have enough big advantages, just have them, play for a chocolate chip cookie or something. Like, that would be
yeah, like, at least play for a reward, like, have something happen.
Yeah, but just this, sorry, you don't get to play, and especially it apparently being at least half the time that's what they get. It just seems stupid. I genuinely don't understand the reasoning behind that, especially since when they get to play, it's still only 50% chance that they get a prize. But at least if they lose, that's interesting because they have wagered their vote, and they'll have to, try to deal with having lost their vote if they lose, which is still interesting. And they have the opportunity to decide, for example, not to gamble their vote. Like, so that's interesting. All of that's interesting. The only thing that's not interesting is giving half the players nothing to do. It seems it's dumb. I'm increasingly frustrated with it. But yeah.
And I have become frustrated with it, and where my increased frustration comes is that I defended it.
Yeah.
And it seems sort of indefensible. It sucks. Like, it's not interesting. Like, It is such a letdown to have people go, and it's just like, okay, cool. mean, I guess even earlier on, at least they weren't there for the vote, so you knew there was like that added some dimension to the game because they couldn't get voted out. So that was interesting. But now that they just literally like just go and hang out there, it's just basically like a boring exile island.
Yeah.
But even there, you could like hunt around, and maybe you can here, but
well, like they've been trying to wring what they can out of it by getting emotional confessionals from everybody who's there, which I like. I like highlighting a single player there for a little bit just to give them extra long confessional where they're alone and feeling more vulnerable. I like that about it, but that's not sufficient to justify this mechanic. So I hope that next time they change something up because it needs something.
Especially when it's the name of the season.
Yeah.
You can't have the name of the season suck. Like that can't.
Well, they can.
Well,
not advisable.
It's not advisable that when you name the entire season around this mechanism, and then it's not interesting and it's really and almost like aggravatingly not interesting because like you know that it could be interesting,
right?
But they don't let it.
Well, and what's inexplicable about it is that they built it this way deliberately. Like it's not chance that half the people are getting, not getting to play. They made it that way on purpose. They made all of these little notes that say you don't get to play. It's not like by sheer dumb whims of fate, every single person who plays loses. Like that would at least be, like you could say that's random, right? And so it's not like, oh, well, just that, the statistics keep working out against them and that's what's making it not interesting. No, they built a game with a rule in it that made it half the time be boring. It's bizarre.
Right. And, and I think part of my defense was that I thought, okay, there's going to be a large number of like, don't get to play because it's hard. But as, by us having seen so many early on, it just means that we're going to get a ramp up of how many get to play. But that is just continued to not bear out. And so you have to think either they are incredibly unlucky in the way in which these are being revealed, and there's just a whole jackpot of them left, or it's stupid. And I'm leaning towards it's stupid.
Yeah, I can only imagine, like, the only thing that makes any kind of sense is the idea that they were just worried that too many crazy things were going to unbalance the season and make it too chaotic. Like, because they, as much as there's chaos and uncertainty in how these things always play out, they want to be able to build narratives, right? And so if the apple cart gets upset every single week, that might, interfere with that. So maybe that was the concern, but who knows? It's definitely not working as it is, though.
Yes, and that's what I keep going back to. There could be a way where they could still limit how many times crazy stuff gets in without there being literally no activity. That is the case. Like, you could be playing to get higher odds to get it. There could be, like you said, you could play for a reward if you don't get the main thing. Like at least something would happen.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.
Get consolation prize. If you don't get to play the game, you get something else, or who knows? Or just let everybody play. Anyway. And also like
stuff, like if it all happens at the beginning, then it all happens at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it just jams up everything like going into the end. They have to build a narrative at the end. I mean, just do something. But anyway, I think we are now in agreement, and now we're just
we're beating the dead horse there. And the mechanic about having to have unanimous or else go to rocks. I mean, I'm sure that the idea there is that if it was a vote or something, then you would always have a case where, like, if you have 5-4 of former tribes, then it's kind of an extra benefit to the numbers, right? So it just like makes it even more lopsided that the people who already have the numbers get to also make that choice. So I could see why they wanted to do that unanimous thing, but it's also just like, I'm not sure that's a good solution because it just means they'll always go to rocks. And if that's why not just make it always random? You know, it's like the losing tribe has to draw rocks to see who goes to Ghost Island. Yeah. Or maybe maybe the losing tribe gets to pick.
Yeah. So
yeah. Anyway, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Chris had a fairly entertaining little freestyle in terms of, celebrating his tribe's victory. I didn't write down any notes about the contents, but I recall being amused.
And so here I was actually pleasantly even more amused than normal by this because, again, going back to watching a lot of basketball and having ads. So the ads leading into this one showed a lot of the part where he goes like mic drop, because it's just like kind of a clever line that everybody gets. And
sure.
But it was just like, I thought he was just going to say something, silly or whatever, and then just do that. And they just used it because it's like has broad appeal. But the fact that it was the end of this like very clever, freestyle, it made me kind of, I just kind of said, all right, that was a pleasant surprise for how I thought this line was going to come in.
Yeah, it was pretty good, I thought. Yeah. I mean, I think it was clearly, like pre-written. I mean, I would imagine by him, but I just mean, I don't think it was improvised on the spot, but still pretty good.
Well, it wouldn't technically be freestyle, but.
Well, it's a freestyle style.
Yeah. Freestyle style.
Yeah. I just mean, I got the impression that he had worked it out ahead of time. But
honestly, like most freestyle is done that way in some respect. Like it's all sort of, even if it's not written word for word, like people who are good at that have workshopped concepts.
Yeah.
And depending on the situation and what they need to draw off of, they're drawing off of a bank of concepts they've already decided, that they then find a way in the moment to rhyme and pull things together. So it's still clever, but it is not,
Well, it's I took some musical improv classes, and some of the techniques that you build there are similar in some respects. I mean, in a lot of musical improv, you actually are sort of consciously avoiding rhymes, because if you rhyme even once, the audience expects it for the whole song, and that just makes it way harder on yourself, when honestly most people really don't care if you rhyme or not. If you don't rhyme, nobody even notices, but if you rhyme once, then they want it for the whole song, because then it'll feel like you chickened out. But when you learn the rhyming, it's all about knowing the second rhyming word first, and then because that's your point. Like that's the beat that you end on, is the satisfying conclusion of the rhyme is what you pick first, and then the other word has to rhyme with it, but it doesn't matter as much what the word is.
Right.
Anyway, I could go on about that, but let's not. So at Ghost Island, Steph doesn't get to play. She talks a little bit in her own little Ghost Island confessional about leaving Mormonism, which she doesn't really talk about it other than to say that she did. I was a little bit interested in maybe hearing more about that. Like, does she still have faith and she just left the formal church, or I don't know. But sounds like she pretty much just changed everything in her life. Getting divorced, I wouldn't be surprised if that's related to leaving Mormonism. It was all kind of a package there.
Yeah, that was part of it, is that, her, again, without putting words in her mouth. It seemed like the marriage was a function of her being a part of the church.
Mm.
And
or at least they shared their faith. And
right. Not that it was arranged by the church, but that that her decision to enter the marriage was based on that shared faith in the church, and that when that either she decided that she didn't want to be with that person, and therefore the church as the secondary, or not wanted to be with the church, and that person then was the collateral. It was unclear which way that went, but they seemed very much related, as as happens with things where there's a passionate faith. I mean that. And then she has kids from that marriage, right? That she brought.
I believe so. Yeah. Well, she talks about wanting to play for her kids and wanting her kids to be proud of her and stuff like that. So, presumably, they are the kids from that marriage. But we don't get much of the detail there, and I don't know that we need it necessarily. But I mean, introducing those subjects made me ask those questions. But she says she's found inner strength doing stuff for herself, which is good. So that's we learn a little bit more about her in time for her to get voted out.
By design, though. I mean, that's
yeah. Well, you spend more time with the people who are going home, especially early in the season when they haven't maybe done as much yet. So in the meantime,
editing thing that again I can't remember how long it's been since we haven't had a season where we didn't have any returning players, but this one is following that more standard narrative when you have no former players. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but the fact that when you have returning players, like you already have this bought in, like, yeah, you still have to like illustrate who they are, but a huge core of your audience already has a knowledge of who people are. So you can spend time doing different things. When you don't, you have to pick and choose who you dive deep with and when. And in certain episodes, it makes sense to just dive deep with the person who's going to go home because you haven't done it yet, because there were other more interesting stories happening up to this point that, Stephanie's case, and again, I mean, it helped that she went to Ghost Island. However, there was so much other interesting things going on with all the other gameplay and all that we just didn't ever get to know her. And force us, and that, but that's a very standard narrative to Survivor in this part of the season, like the sort of swing part of the season. I don't know what else to call it, like where you've already had the, I used to always use it in the the group context where you have the forming, then is storming next, and then norming.
This was that sounds right, but this is your analogy or model or whatever you call it.
I've lost the
that
order.
Sounds right. Forming, storming, norming. That sounds right to me.
Yeah. Yes. And then performing. That's the fourth one, right? So yeah, the forming is sort of the entry part. Then because everybody's polite at the beginning for the most part. And obviously Survivor, there's a little, they kind of introduce the storming a little earlier. But in a regular, in a regular group dynamics, you'd have the politeness, the forming, the kind of how much, how far can I push, and what is, what is okay. And then people start to disrupt it. By pushing too far and deciding to draw the line or take control of something. And then the norming is that everybody kind of then figures out how to work together with all the different personalities. And once people are working together within their own personalities, that's when the group then performs. These seasons sometimes follow that. So you have the forming stage of like the groups getting to know each other and kind of figuring out what's going on. And then, the storming is always kind of there. And now we're in the norming before they introduce, like they change the dynamic. And when they do the merge or the mix up, they restart the process.
Right.
And the other interesting thing about Survivor is the forming, the politeness of the forming, like other than like the first time when they're on the boat, like the first time somebody goes to tribal council, the storming part gets introduced. that just by nature. They force that on people. And so they speed up the whole process, but then they reintroduce it when the mix-up. So what they're trying to do is never let us get into the norming phase. And,
right.
and
I think
this is what happens.
Yeah, I think it's a very useful abstract when talking about this game because, like we talk about, the tribe mix-ups and the one that we did early on this season, it's obviously intended to disrupt the norming process. You want to get them, the producers are hoping to get the group to storming because it's interesting. And then before it can start to settle down too much, they mix it up again, hoping to maintain the constant storming phase. But in this particular case, it seems that it has started to stagnate a little bit, which makes it about due for another mix-up, which seems to be right on schedule for next week.
Exactly. And that's just, when you kind of look at what episode we are, I mean, that's about right. I mean, it's starting to get, things are, not that it's stale, but everything we've talked about, we're just in the norming phase. Nothing's really going on.
Right.
And I think that's what, just to talk about, to take that analogy into why Boston Rob was so successful is that he essentially hacked this and he normed a group quickly. So then they got to the performing phase, but he also built it where the group was strong enough that it could perform across different mix-ups and things like that. And then he controlled what the storming looked like, as opposed to letting it be dictated from outside. And that was, it was just literally, he hijacked this process and hacked it. And that's why he was so successful, But anyway, on to this.
Yeah. So we have Navidi celebrating having their back-to-back victories. James has been let off the hook by just luck of the draw, ending up on the stronger challenge or a stronger tribe, just because he had his one challenge where he, messed it up for everybody and he was kind of flagellating himself about that for a while, but now he's just been on the tribe that keeps winning. So it kind of just gets to sort of fade into the past now, which is good because I actually kind of like him. I find him kind of charismatic when he's not beating himself up about losing a challenge. Donathan gets a little homesick, confides in Laurel, and then Chris also sees that sort of the emotion as an opportunity to connect, apparently in a sincere way. I feel like when we first saw Chris talking to the camera about seeing that opportunity to connect, my like hackles went up a little bit, like he was going to use it in a manipulative way. But then it seemed like an actual genuine connection. And, maybe this idea where there's a strategy element to wanting to have a connection with everybody, but that doesn't necessarily make the connection itself insincere.
Yes, I also was impressed with Chris in this episode for a number of reasons. I mean, obviously he has established himself as a strong challenge player as long as there's throwing and stuff involved. Not just that. The clever, again, the rhyming thing that would sort of pleasantly surprise me because I thought it was going to be some douchebaggy thing that and then this, while odd, just because he talks in an odd way sometimes, like he sounds when he says, oh, I'm going to go bond with Donovan over that because it will help me like have another ally. It sounds like super, super superficial, but yet the conversation that they had was genuine.
About like real stuff too, like not even just small talk.
Yeah, it was genuine and real and deep to a level that I wasn't expecting out of this. And it wasn't what I got out of him because of the fact that the way we were introduced is this petty feud, and that's what we believe he is like. And then we start to see there's a lot more depth to him even outside of his, because everybody can have the confessional at Ghost Island with, ears and genuine feelings, because, that's cutting you to your core. Like, unless you're just a sociopath, like, you have some real feeling. But then to see that as he enters back in and they're winning, so he doesn't need to do all of this.
Yeah.
And he's doing it as a choice. And yes, it is a balance in that it is smart strategically. Like, that's okay. But he's being real about it. And I was very impressed with him. He is moved up in my book.
Yeah, I agree. And like, let's contrast that with what we were just talking about earlier with Bradley, where Bradley's kind of go-to was, we're going to vote them out, so don't even talk to them.
Right.
Whereas Chris is in an even safer spot through the tribe, just continuing to win and not even having to put pressure on that. And then he is already proactively reaching out to the people he hasn't already connected with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also like that Donathan and Laurel are still being, confidants to one another.
Yes.
We went to the immunity challenge, and I felt at the time, I wrote in my notes that it felt early for the immunity challenge, but I don't know, the episode pacing overall didn't seem out of place, but I wrote in my notes that it seemed early.
I think the episode seemed to move quickly just in general, because there just wasn't much to it. It was very trope. I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know if the right word, like, it just, you kind of know what's coming. So it just moved. It felt like it moved fast, because it was like you weren't involved in the moment. Like, you could sort of anticipate the pacing, and I'm having trouble describing it, but it just, that's how it felt to me. It was just like, it was just kind of like scrolling through Twitter or something, where you're only like half paying attention and just waiting for something interesting to pop up. And so it just seems to move fast.
Yeah. Lots of the beats early on in the episode didn't really change the status quo in any meaningful way. It was development, not change. But in any event, we get to the immunity challenge, and it's made more clear that clip we had seen in the preview of Desiree getting pulled and her head going under the water. It's, maybe if I had been sharper in the preview, I could have figured this out. But I guess the issue was that she was holding onto the rope, but hadn't managed to be floating on the boogie board when they pulled it. And that's why it was kind of, they were pulling her underwater, which, I suppose it worked out fine, but there was a part of me that was wondering, is like, well, the extra drag of having to pull her through the water, I wonder if it might have been worth taking a few more seconds to just go ahead and get up onto the board. I don't know. But at the same time, her caring more about the challenge than her personal comfort, and telling them, go ahead and go. That seems, that's commitment. We haven't seen a lot from Desiree so far, but I don't know. Chelsea is also another one of the people we haven't really seen a lot from. We saw a bit more of her tonight, or not tonight, but in this episode. We're getting a little bit more of her with these last two episodes. But Naviti gets off to a big lead early on, and then they win. So it's kind of we had Kellen, who tried to solve the puzzle for Malolo, was not able to get it done in time, and she was disappointed about that. But I mean, they were behind going in, so then we have Michael talking about the numbers struggle, which is just kind of, it does put that tribe in an interesting position, because I think in a lot of ways, if we think of, the majority's position there, I think Michael still would seem like the biggest threat, except they do actually want to try to not lose every single challenge. And Michael's one of their stronger people. So to vote him out would make that even more dramatic, except that we also now know that they're going to mix it up again next time. So maybe they ought to have voted out Michael. But oh well.
I mean, I think it did help that he went and approached Bradley.
Yeah.
And they kind of cleared the air, I guess, a little bit, you know.
Well, yeah, I think that Michael and Jenna and Stephanie, the three remaining from the Alliance of Four last time, just were able to recognize to say, if anyone was going to flip, they would have done it last time. So now with the numbers even more lopsided and us not having an idol, it's every man for them, for themselves, that sort of thing. So basically all three of them essentially willing to say, if it's not me, I will vote for whoever it is.
Right.
And, that's kind of, that's how we ended up with a near unanimous, I guess it's always a little bit weird to call it a unanimous vote when technically the person who gets voted out always has their own vote. So it's like, there's still one vote for someone else. It's just unanimous from everybody else.
Yeah, definitely unanimous against them. Yeah.
Yeah. But in any event, all three of those people know that it's, that their fate's out of their hands at this point. And so it just becomes a question of, okay, if they can't get any of that other five to break, they have to kind of, split apart themselves. And, Michael even says in the tribal council later, it's kind of like, look, you guys, we tried a thing and it didn't work. So we're all interested in sticking around here, including me. And so I am willing to do a new thing. You don't have to think of me as the defeated enemy, please.
Yeah.
So I liked that. He continues to be, eloquent for his age.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I won't relate it to this, but just again with him being younger, it's like there's sort of a newness, like the Emperor's New Clothes kind of thing, like to go in and just be like, just call it as it is and be like, guys, you wanted to get rid of me and I tried something. That doesn't make me that doesn't mean that you need to come after me. Like I have this vendetta against you. I just made a decision. I'm cool. What do we need to do next? Sort of the freshness that he is coming at it with, it is just sort of blows up the kind of the narratives that people are used to, is oh, well, he targeted me. So it's sort of what the petty thing we saw with Chris and is it Dominic?
Yeah. And that in some ways was really only petty on one side, because it really all stemmed from Dom just being unreasonable at the very beginning of just deciding to call out Chris's decision in the challenge.
But then Chris kind of digs in on that, and that's where Michael is so Bradley starts that, and Michael's, I think, again, it comes to it with his youth. It's just no, I don't have anything against you, Bradley. I had to pick somebody. You had these attributes that made sense, and I'm cool to keep playing with you. Let's move on.
Let's keep our tribe strong so we don't keep losing every single time.
Yeah, let's just do that,
Yeah. And I mean, I think ultimately that was persuasive. I mean, the five in charge really knew that it was they were picking between three, and there's a lot of discussion of well, who is it going to be? Well, let's keep Michael because it keeps the tribe stronger. So if it's going to be either Stephanie or Jenna, well, Stephanie went to Ghost Island. Does she have an advantage? Desiree searches her bag. Nope, she doesn't have one. So they vote for her. I mean, it's kind of, the tribal council is really just each of them sort of making their own case for staying in the game. But, that I think that's maybe the part that was just unsatisfying in this episode. Well, it's just doubling on top of Stephanie being yet another person who doesn't get to play the wager at Ghost Island. But then also it just really being, I was going to say tribunal, but that's kind of defined by 3 judges, right? It's a quintunal. That doesn't sound right. A quintbunal.
Sure.
I like that. I've declared it. So it's the 5 judges against the 3, and just gonna which one of them. And it's in some ways it's this weird sort of little pseudo final tribal council, with the 3 each trying to make the case, But just because that felt like I think the producers have recognized in the past that when it just becomes just a numbers game, that's less fun. And so they have usually done pretty well at keeping things more mixed up than that. And it looks like, I think we're in for a correction next week. I've got to imagine that's a response to have two mix-ups prior to the merge. It's not like they haven't done it before, but it's not every season. And my guess is it's a response to one tribe just dominating the other.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that it probably also gives them the dual, cover of whatever they're going to do with Ghost Island. It's like everything is changing. We're mixing up tribes and we're changing Ghost Island so it doesn't suck. Yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up with Steph wanted, the experience and the opportunity. Jenna had sort of a weird sales pitch of saying she wants to stay so that she can get better at making relationships, which is an admirable personal goal, but not exactly what I would think of as a good reason for other people to keep you around.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I know that I'm not good at making friends with you, so please let me stay so I can practice more. I mean, I don't want to be hard on Jenna in the sense that I feel like if she's recognizing that as something that she needs to work on a personal basis, and both from a strategic standpoint and a personal one, and that's very good to say, I recognize this in myself and I want to develop it. But again, it's not necessarily a reason for other people to, but in any event, and then Michael just talks about his lifelong fandom, which, I couldn't help but say, things like when he's saying, I started watching, I think he said when I was 12, and I'm just going that's not even that long ago. We've been doing our podcast longer than that. But anyway, he's so young, little whippersnapper. But yeah, so the votes, Stephanie voted for Desiree, which was, I wonder how that happened actually, because it seemed like each of those 3 was on board with the possibility of, voting for each other. So I wonder if she voted for Desiree just because she knew it was going to be her.
That's the only sense that I can make out of it. Otherwise, there was nothing to,
Yeah, because if it seemed like it might be Jenna, why would Stephanie not vote for Jenna?
Right.
But in any event, I suppose it's true also that if you feel like, well, there's going to be 5 people who are for sure voting for the same person, then it doesn't matter. It's one thing if you think if they're trying to split the vote and you think you can disrupt that. But in any event, Stephanie's voted out. In her final words, she said, she's disappointed, but I liked her attitude of feeling like she did her best anyway, and she's looking forward to going home, being with family, even though, you and I know, because we discussed it when we talked about Morgan, that she doesn't actually get to go home right away. She's still sequestered for the
Yep.
But in any event, Probst had one of his classic You remember the movie Mystery Men with the character of the Sphinx who had all of these sort of pseudo wise sayings that Ben Stiller's character ended up calling him out on? It's kind of like, you must master your anger, or anger will be my master, right? Yeah, that's what you were going to say, isn't it? But so this idea of Probst saying, well, the Navidi Five are winning as an alliance, but losing as a tribe. And I'm like, that sounds meaningful, but like, is like, have you really said anything there, Probst? Have you really? Because the tribe was losing as a combined unit, which was more than just that 5.
Yes.
And they lost both challenges last time either, when it was 5-4. It's true that so it's like, it's technically true, but it's also kind of like saying, isn't it true that 2 + 2 = 4? Makes you think, doesn't it?
It's also, I think it's more like saying, it's interesting that 2 + 2 and 8 - 4 both equal 4.
Yeah.
Like, he just said
for the ages
that are true and tried to make them sound like they were somehow related. Yes, both statements are true. The tribe is losing, the alliance is winning.
I think there are circumstances in which what he said could have been sort of more meaningful, because on the one hand, it could have been a situation, say, where they were keeping a weak member of their alliance and voting out a strong member of the opposition, thus weakening the tribe for challenges while keeping their alliance intact. But that's kind of not what happened here. So, but Probst has to say stuff, so it's fine. It's just not one of his more incisive ones. It was kind of a little bit more generic. And just as a bit of autocorrect amusement, I was taking notes for this one on my phone, and it corrected Probst to probation. So probation says Navidi 5 winning as an alliance, but losing as a tribe.
Well, their probation is over next week.
Yeah. So another mix-up, and looks like rehashing the Dom versus Chris thing.
Yep.
So we will see next week. We didn't even make an hour for this episode.
I told you that when we were texting. I was like, this one's going to be quick and easy. I don't have a ton to say.
Yep. But I think we wrung all we can out of it. So we'll be back next week for Survivor Ghost Island episode 6. Thank you for listening and or watching, and you can find all of this stuff that we do at christianaellis.com.
Off we go.
Good night.
Good night.